So the Reality War just released, and it has definitely been met with a lot of criticism, but I am one of the few people that actually love this episode, and I just have to talk about everything great that happened, because there is not much positivity surrounding this episode so far, and I legitimately left the cinema thinking this is one of the best Doctor Who finales of all time. So yeah, get ready for a very controversial review. This video will cover every main point I have about the episode, but if you want to see my full review, go check out my account on Serialized, the link's down in the description below. Also, this is a spoiler warning. You have about 5 seconds before I continue and talk all things Reality War, and you do not want this spoiled. Honestly, so much happens, so make sure you watch the episode before watching this video. So much happens in this episode, so I'm going to try and go in chronological order, but I may end up mishmashing and going backwards a little bit, but hopefully you should still be able to follow along. So they actually brought back in the Joy to the World episode. I personally really like this Christmas special, and I'm so glad that they brought this character back. Not only were they so important in that episode and to the Doctor in that episode, but the Time Hotel concept was so amazing, and I'm actually so glad that it became a pivotal part of this episode. I think it was such a clever way of getting the Doctor out of this predicament he literally could not get out of otherwise. It was a great way of being able to stabilise the reality so that all of the key people, mainly Unit, were able to remember the real world and continue as usual. It even offered up some very comedic moments with Anita just existing in the background and saying she works in hospitality. Now, I really like the idea that follows after this, with May the 23rd/24th kind of repeating on a cycle, getting weaker and weaker. I love that concept. I like how it adds to last week's episode. We had moments in last week where, say, the Rani was talking to Belinda, saying she loves this part, where she gets to explain the Belinda's life's a lie. That makes way more sense now that we know she's lived through this loads of times. It's also a perfect way of explaining why it's this iteration that Anita breaks through and saves the Doctor, and I just think that all works really well. I had no clue how this episode was going to start off based on the cliffhanger of last week, and for me that instantly worked and got me into the story. We then have like a mini montage section that seems to be recruiting everyone from the Doctor's past. Well, at least from these 2 seasons. So we have all of Unit come back together, Millie comes back in, we have Rose Noble come back in, we obviously have Susan Twist come back in, literally every major character from the past 2 years. I think the only character that didn't come back was Lenny Rush, but generally everybody's here. It did really feel Journey's End or Avengers Assemble sort of thing, but it didn't feel as impactful generally, as obviously we haven't had as much time with these characters or within this era. But it was a nice thing to bring together, especially knowing that this is Ncuti's regeneration story. I love the character that Rani in this too. I do love that she's not just a villain, like she wants the Doctor to join her. Her plan isn't inherently evil, she just wants to bring back the Time Lords. Sure, it's her version of the Time Lords in her name, using Omega from the Underworld. But I like that she just strolls into Unit and they just have a bit of a conversation / argument, and then she tries to recruit him. Also, that scene where the Doctor gets on her little hover scooter thing, that was brilliant. Crazy, silly, stupid, whatever, but brilliant. Anyway, when he's up there, I actually like that he does want to see Omega. Like, who would not? Like, he's met Omega before. Sure, it is just as a voice, essentially, through a vessel. But you would want to meet the real deal, surely. At that point, you would. Especially the first of the Time Lords in this sort of situation. You'd want to meet him. And I'm glad the Doctor didn't turn it down. I know classic fans are probably going to hate, especially, that he's some big giant skeleton baby. Yes, he got suit-act, okay? But, I don't know, it kind of worked for me. I believe he would turn into something like that if you're stuck in literal hell. Essentially. It worked for this episode, and disposing of that Rani was shocking for one, but also just quite funny, you know? Like, she was such a big threat set up, and it just got tossed aside. I think one of the things I do not like about the episode, generally, is that Miss Flood didn't have much to do, especially because we've been waiting 2 seasons to get her in this episode, but I like the fact that they kept her alive, and that she's escaped, because I think that is going to be the thread for the next season. But I potentially see this as Doctor Who's version of Marvel's Loki, where he's kind of this mischievous villain that just plays tricks and comes back every now and then and then just disappears and escapes. I kind of want her to become this trickster that is behind some random episodes and that then just escapes at the end just to come back again a season later. I think it would be such a great character to have, and Anita Dobson clearly does that mischievous nature quite well, as we've seen so far. I also love the Vindicator's use. It has been so key to this season, and obviously they set up the billion supernovas, so of course that's going to cast out and be able to repel Omega back into hell. Like, it just all works. I think all of the ways that they got through the villains was perfect, and I love the speed of it, knowing it's a regeneration story. At first, I was so convinced it was going to end up being an episode all about Conrad, as he was the final villain left. But in the end, I think this really does work. Conrad is also one that I think they've dealt with really well. I love that Ruby was the one to confront him, and I love how Ruby tied it back to his want for a family, and how he did believe in the Doctor and aliens, and he still does, clearly, as he tried to make this reality as nice as he can based on what the Doctor said. I do believe that's what he was doing, and I do believe that that is his true nature. Yes, he's a terrible person. He doesn't really get redeemed in this. He's basically had his life altered against his free will, but at the same time, he is kind of free from that torment that he had, and I kind of like it. He's both saved but not redeemed, and I think it kind of works for his character. I think the way they also get rid of Desiderium, the little baby, is just perfect, right? Just wish for no more wishes. Like, that just instantly is the best way out of that. I know when you normally have like genies who grant wishes, you can't ask for extra wishes. There's never a thing asking to have no wishes, and so it's kind of a nice loophole. Again, you may find that kind of an easy way out, or like a cop-out, but for me, I actually think that is the best way of getting out of having that god just exist. Because having that baby exist just cannot happen, I don't think, without his abilities being taken away. And then it was a nice touch, obviously, giving the baby to Carla, you know, as we got the history of her being this foster parent. I think it all really worked. Then the last main element of the story is obviously Poppy, and I think that was one of the best elements of this story. It didn't tie to space babies too heavily, so people who hate space babies, don't worry. It's clearly not that attached to it. It's just the memory of that space baby has created this Poppy. The Doctor also said in Space Babies that he wished he could be Poppy's dad, so in a weird way, the wish did kind of come true as well. I think with all the setup of Susan, and the Doctor maybe having kids out of order and not being a dad yet, and then having this twist that this might be how he has his daughter, I think that's really impactful, and you can see that with the episode and the performances. It's clearly such an important thing for both Belinda and the Doctor, and it was actually quite nice to see. And the whole time I was so ready for the next season to be Ncuti and Verada as parents through time and space with the baby. Obviously, that didn't happen. They saved the day. Poppy kind of comes out alive temporarily and slowly fades away. And I love, again, that they tie it back in to Ruby knowing the alternate version of 2025 and that she can remember the baby existing. I love how the Doctor also forgets, along with Belinda, at the same time, as Poppy's coat's disappearing, as Poppy's disappearing, as the crib's disappearing. Normally the Doctor always remembers things that are lost to time, like with the Matt Smith era in the first season he had, where when Rory's taken by the crack in time, he still remembers Rory but Amy doesn't. However, here it's kind of the reverse. I think it works for this episode, it works for Ruby's character, and I love the sentiment it sets up, with Ruby being able to remember and say to the Doctor the importance of a single life. How can he forget one life when he obviously went out of his way to save Ruby, who also, at her story, did not exist, who has gone out of his way to save Susan Twist, this person born out of nothingness, essentially. And having all of these people come around and say how the Doctor has put so much importance on just their life, and the importance of him saving just this one person. Although it's been done before and can maybe be considered a little cheesy, I love that the characters all say they're kind of like the Doctor's children, because in a way that can kind of be a setup in itself of how Susan exists. We'll get onto it later, but of course Poppy doesn't actually end up to be a Time Lord baby and isn't the Doctor's child, but you can kind of leave it open-ended by having everyone still be the Doctor's child. Because we have the Rani in this episode say that they're like insects to the Doctor, these humans, because of how powerful he is, whereas clearly she doesn't get that relationship. They aren't insects, they are smaller than him. They are what you would call below him, but in a more parental way, and I quite like the messaging of that. Following this, we obviously have the Doctor go off on his own, because he's the only person that can save Poppy. He has to sacrifice himself to shift reality. And I have definitely seen online that there is hate towards this, and that this regeneration feels forced, that he has to give up his life. To me, it is no more forced than right at the end of The End of Time, the Doctor having to sacrifice himself for Wilf. Sure, they set that up with the 3 knocks. In any other story, he could have just sonicked the radiation chamber and Wilf would have got out and no one would have died. But he had to in that because of the prophecy, and he believed it was the right thing to do. Here, to me, it's the same. There's no prophecy, but the Doctor always saves that extra life. He cannot make the exception this time. And if he knows there's a way to save her, he will do it. And for me, the shifting reality also can kind of work in the sci-fi explanation. Him feeding his Time Lord DNA and his regeneration energy into the time vortex, which normally only goes through time and space, allowing it to break that almost 4th dimension and go beyond reality and be able to tweak it a little bit to bring Poppy back to life, I think that really works for me. I think the main thing for this episode, which I don't see a lot of credit for, is the continuity. I think a lot of negativity I see actually is that this is very confusing and a lot of it doesn't make sense. For me, I'm the complete opposite. I think everything is explained so well within its own rules, and I just love that I can watch an episode like this and not find plot holes. This then leads into one of the big shock moments of this episode, the 13th Doctor coming back. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I kind of love it. Right? One, it foreshadows the potential next Doctor being a female, again, which I think is a great thing, which leads directly into number 2, where I actually think is a great idea. They're doubling down on a female Doctor. We'll obviously talk more on that when we get there, but I think this definitely is putting weight onto the fact that the Doctor can be a woman, and I think that works so well here. I've always been on the stance that if you just do it once, it is a gimmick. It feels like a failed attempt. Let's never do that again. The fact that it seems they're doing another female Doctor, especially this soon, I think is a great thing for establishing it as a new normal. And thirdly, the 13th Doctor here was just great, and I loved seeing her character come in. I think she worked really well with Ncuti. It's a weird combination, as they're very similar Doctors to me. Like, they're the most similar out of any Doctors in the New Who era, if put together, in my mind. But also, I love that they kind of use their own strengths to help each other. Right? To me, I didn't really see much of the Yazza 13 stuff throughout the era, and then it kind of just came out of nowhere. But I kind of like that this Dr. Ncuti, who loves life, who loves everything, who openly expresses that, is able to tell the 13th Doctor to just tell her. I know that doesn't ultimately happen, because these adventures end up getting lost in their memory, but I do kind of love this Doctor helping the old Doctor, and vice versa. I also just like having Ncuti in his final moments, seeing a past self, and having that Doctor, one of the only other ones to fully accept and look forward to the next regeneration, telling him to do the same. He is the most joyous Doctor, I think I can safely say, and the fact that he goes out with a smile is obviously just perfect, and the fact that that came from the 13th Doctor. A Doctor that I feel like many don't really appreciate is great. And obviously, they have a dig at Tennant always coming back. So bringing back a Doctor who's not your typical fan favourite, I think is just also an excellent choice. We then have the Doctor wake up in Belinda's back garden. And this reality is different. Belinda now has a child. She has a house. She doesn't have a partner. Generally, her life has changed very drastically. In this scene, we obviously have the Doctor discover that despite him using up his regeneration energy to save what is supposedly his daughter, we then have this scene where we have the Doctor fully realise that Poppy is now a human and no longer part Time Lord, which is so sad for him, for the fact that he gave up his whole life and his regeneration energy to save Poppy, with the hope of it being his descendant. Maybe thinking this is how Susan comes to be, and maybe thinking that the Time Lords can come back after all, without having to destroy the world. With Poppy 100% human, he has saved the life like he will always do, but at the cost of his own. And for me, I think that was a perfect ending, especially for Ncuti's Doctor. I know everyone hates his crying. He cries at the loss of any form of life, every time it happens, but he ends up dying happy, knowing that he saved everybody. This obviously is then when we get to his regeneration scene, and Murray Gold was so great throughout. The music in this whole episode was fantastic, but this final regeneration scene is honestly, I think, perfection to me. First, I love his exit speech to Belinda, where he talks about memories. I think it was quite a nice, sentimental, touching and relatable feeling. This then obviously moves into his scene in the TARDIS, where he has the lights dim and they slowly go out as he reaches the exit, with him obviously floating out and regenerating. And I love his final lines. I love that the star from Joy to the World is there, and I love that his final words are joy. He's the Doctor that loves life. He loves people. He loves everything. Yes, he has his darker moments, and yes, he's upset at times with his crying, but that's all out of the joy he has for everything. He just wants everything to be joyful, and the fact that that's his last words are so fitting. And I love that even despite everything bad that happens to him in this episode, that is how he chooses to go out. For me, Ncuti is not one of my all-time favourite Doctors. I personally prefer some of the other personalities of the Doctor, you know, Capaldi being my favourite, and they're very different characterizations. But he has been so good, especially this past season, and this episode to me is a standout. And I just wanted more. I felt like his run has been cut too short. I am fully believing that it is his decision to leave. If he's happy with leaving, then I'm happy with him stepping away. But regardless of that, I'm still upset that he has left. This regeneration has kind of left me feeling upset, despite him not being one of my favourites. And I think it's so unfair, really, that he only has 15 full episodes as the Doctor. That's 2 more than Eccleston, who only had 1 season. It's actually crazy knowing how little time he got as the Doctor. But that then leads on to who supposedly the new Doctor is, which is Billie Piper. Now, I personally think this casting choice is an excellent choice if she is the Doctor. I'm going to have another video on that in a few days because I have a lot to say about it. But I actually think it is probably the smartest decision they could have done currently with where the show is at right now. But there have been theories that she may not be the Doctor. So right now, I have no clue what to think. It could go anyway. But I do like where it's ended off. It's a cliffhanger. It's going to get people talking. It's going to get people to keep watching. It might even keep the show going an extra season at least, just because people want that answer to how that's happened. Playing devil's advocate though, Rusty Davies has just been bringing back loads of stuff, and I'm not against it, but having Tennant's face back for a couple episodes with Donna, having the Midnight sequel, having many fan favourite classic Who villains brought back out of nowhere, now having Billie Piper, like, all of it is not just coming from his era, but the history of the show. And whilst I love returning faces and returning characters, I feel like the show needs to get back to a more normal pace of just get a new actor in, get a new season, maybe a new writer. I think it needs to happen. So this could go both ways, really, despite me loving this episode and looking forward to the future. I will say, though, I'm not on the train of sack Rusty Davies. That's all I'm seeing in the comments after this episode. I don't think that's the case. I just think they need to change the format of how showrunners work. I don't think having a singular showrunner is best for the show. And again, I might make a video on that because that's a whole topic in itself and is such a massive part of what Doctor Who is. But for me, yeah, Rusty Davies is not inherently the issue here, in my eyes. Now, with all that out of the way, this episode to me is a 10 out of 10. 5 stars. Yes, there's a couple issues. For me, it was just such an entertaining watch. Sure, I was at the cinema, so that maybe amplifies it. But this actually is one of the best finales I have seen in Doctor Who. For me, it has the quick wrapping up that Rusty Davies does, but actually explained well for once. It has the amazing sentiment. It has the build-up for the regeneration. I think the villains are actually handled well. I think the characters are actually utilised fairly well. I think it has one of the best regeneration scenes. There's so many things that I think just are excellent that combined together, how can this not be an excellent episode for me? And I was truly shocked leaving that cinema to look online and see so much hate, more than normal. Because there are some places I can see people having issue, but to me it's not enough to say this is one of the worst things Doctor Who's put out. So I'm not expecting anyone to comment and say they agree with me here, but I would love to hear some of your thoughts. With that said, hopefully you have enjoyed this video. If you want to see more, there will be videos coming out over the next few days to weeks, so make sure you subscribe for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.